Alright, how's everybody doing today? Due to extremely popular request of all of I don't know, maybe 2 people, decided to do a walk around video of my 2006 Nissan Pathfinder. This is chassis code R51, it's what everybody calls them, usually big time in other countries. But so this one is sitting on about, I'm going to say, 2.5, 3 inches of lift. It's running 35s. It's pretty common for me to run those on this platform. This is my second Pathfinder. My original Pathfinder was a 2006 as well, but it was white. It's called the Trail Limo. This is the Trail Limo 2.0. The front bumper is a custom bumper made by hand. I made it using cardboard cutouts to get my dimensions and templates for all the pieces. This is 3/16 plate that's been welded together. Aluminum skid plate, upper and lower. The tow hook is mounted with a 1/2-inch steel plate. It's been TIG welded and then welded to the frame. Radiator support and everything has been boxed in. Square tube, 1/8-inch thick wall. So I'll start with the front for you guys. I do run a camera system on this truck. It is a little bit bigger than a standard Toyota pickup or a little Suzuki Samurai, Jeep Wrangler, things like that. So I use a front camera. This is extremely helpful when you do breakovers and crest the top of hills, things like that. It's nice to be able to see which way the trail goes. I run a basic CV antenna setup. This is just a Fire Stick 4-foot. Standard light bars, pods, those are off of Amazon. I do recommend when you order a light bar to try and find one that does not have floodlights in the outside edge. The floodlights tend to spread the beam and it will glare off of your windshield very, very brightly. You can see this one has a glare deflecting shield that I made. It does help considerably. There is a little bit of light that gets on the hood, but it's very, very visible. Makes it very nice at night. See the trail, see stuff out in front of you. So the front suspension is actually 4 inches wider than stock. Now this is a stock control arm that has been modified. It's been cut, lengthened, and boxed. And then you'll also might notice that this, from the pivot point down to the ball joint, is actually higher. You'll notice that my arm has a little bit more clearance than a standard stock arm. The reason for that is I took the ball joint and I lowered it into the arm about 1.5 inches and then reboxed everything in. I also changed the ball joint angle. It's about, I think, 15 to 20 degrees more angle than it originally had. That gives it a nice range of motion. With this setup right now, I am strapped. You'll see my Super Duty headquarters strap system here. This is strapped at about 14 inches of travel. I have another set of arms that I used to run. They're on Victor Lopez's Pathy. He's on Xterra XE, and he's around, you'll see him on Instagram, stuff like that. He's big lifted Pathfinder, spare tire carrier, rooftop tent. He's running fiberglass. His arms were the original arms that I made after these. Those are 7 inches wider per side. He has custom chromoly CV shafts that he's running. I'm running a Titan Swap chromoly shaft here, and right over there underneath my CV you'll see there's probably about 1/4 of an inch to maybe a little more worth of spacers there. That kind of helps keep the CVs in line with the cups. My steering link is just a stock steering link that has been sleeved with chromoly tubing and then drilled, pinned, and welded. My original drive shafts with this setup were factory drive shafts that were sleeved with 1.5 inch chromoly that were drilled, pinned, and tigged. Those were due to the fact that back when I originally designed this, there was not an aftermarket for this type of stuff for this platform. The Xterras and Frontiers, they had, drop bracket lift kits and things like that back then, but they didn't, nobody had really caught on to the Titan swap stuff yet. So this was an old kit. I had it on my Pathfinder for probably 2 or 3 years, and then it went on Victor's Pathfinder until I upgraded to the 7-inch kit. I ran it on that white Pathfinder for a while, and then I swapped it out. Ended up doing a couple other builds, and so it kind of snowballed from there, and I kind of went back to the Pathfinder. This is using a Radflow Titan swap coilover. This coilover is actually designed for Titan swap. Currently right now, if you know anything about Titan arms, the distance between this pivot point and your shock mounting location is actually about an inch out farther out on the arm on a Titan. So they run a little bit longer shock, and the suspension is 3 inches wider per side. I'm still using the factory Pathfinder location. I'm running a 600-pound spring. So the front of my truck is a little softer than if you just did a basic bolt-on Titan swap and used this shock and spring combo. I probably, when I redesign it, I will change this arm and probably move this out at least an inch to help with the dampening and stuff like that. I built this truck as cheaply as possible to just do basic trail runs, camping, stuff like that. I'm not a rock crawler or anything like that by any means. So this current setup just kind of reflects that. I just try to keep it cheap. My upper control arm is basically just a stock upper control arm that has been reworked. Right here you can see I took the ball joint, cut it out, and then changed the angle of it. I also cut and sleeved and then boxed the arm at that end, and those are polyurethane bushings. Just basic cheap setup. Those, I think those are like 12 bucks per piece, whereas your stock bushing, if you had to put one in there, was like 35 back then. I'm not sure what they go for now, but pretty easy, simple way to increase the longevity of your ball joints and heims and doing all that crazy stuff. You can just run some polyurethane bushings and they work very well. Easily replaceable, easy to grease and service. So that pretty much wraps up the front. Now I'm running a 35-inch tire. These are the stock wheels. They are a 16-inch wheel. And they are a little bit too narrow for this tire. And you'll notice that my wear pattern, if you look, the tire is actually very cupped, very rounded. So I run a tire at a lot lower pressure than what it should be run at. These are rated at full max carrying capacity at 50 psi. I'm currently running them at 38 psi. Even after a half-hour drive down the freeway, I have no sidewall temperatures that are very high. They're still easily touchable without any issues. So far I've done pretty good. You might notice the homemade Snorkel kit. This actually goes into the factory air box with a K&N filter drop-in. I just basically remove the piece that goes to the end of the fender, put this coupling on there, and then ran the aluminum tubing up and out. This is aluminum tubing, 3-inch tubing for an intercooler. The leftover stuff from other projects that I had laying around. And then I ordered the little Snorkel scoop up here. It's 35 bucks on Amazon. They're pretty nice. The rock slider slash step, if you can call it that. They're kind of thin wall. You can see, I'll get it a little closer for you. Taking a couple hits on some rocks. They've definitely been used. They're not as strong as I would like. I would really like some chromoly ones that, you know, have a real nice kick out on them, but these work for now. I got these for 70 bucks, I think, 60 bucks off of OfferUp. So I cut all the factory brackets off. These were originally for a Tahoe or a Silverado, and so I just made my own legs, and they're welded and mounted to the frame underneath. So it works out pretty good. This is a factory emblem, believe it or not. That is not a Pet Boys emblem. Nissan thought that would be cool to put that on there, I guess. But the off-road edition does have this. Now, if you look at a standard 4x4 Pathfinder, they have a plastic skid plate on the gas tank. That's kind of lame. You definitely want to upgrade that if you do any kind of trails or any type of off-roading with your Pathfinder. They come factory, the off-road edition, with this skid plate for the transfer case. There isn't one for the transmission. I did have an aluminum skid, full set of skids on my other Pathfinder, and I never ran into a situation where the transmission pan was even close to being hit. Now I'm sure if you try to do some real crazy rock crawling with very large rocks, you could possibly damage it, but it's pretty unlikely. They do give you a nice little skid plate for the oil pan. Does not cover the diff housing, but like I said, you can see I run quite a bit of different trails. I wheel this truck about 3 times a week on average, so I don't really run into situations where I would damage the diff housing. One of the things that you'll notice about the Nissan is that if you look at it, one of the reasons that attracted me to it over the 4Runner was the lack of anything hanging down below the frame rails. Now, Toyotas does not mean that Toyotas are not capable of wheeling, because anyone who knows anything about Marlin, Crawler, or any of those other guys, the Toyotas are no joke on a trail. So don't think that I'm knocking Toyota or anything like that. I'm not. I'm an avid Toyota guy. You can see underneath there, you can see my Tundra over in the background. That belongs to my wife. And behind me, underneath this tarp, is a Toyota race car, drag car that I built. So anyway, there's nothing hanging down, no gas tank, no transfer case, none of that stuff hangs down. So I felt, without having to do a lot of lift, I could get on most trails and get this truck out and do some camping and some trail runs and stuff. So that's why I bought the original one, and that's why I went back to another one. They're fairly cheap. Most of the parts you can buy now are fairly readily off of the shelf. You can buy them and put them in. Do a nice little basic lift, some good tires, and these will wheel pretty well. This is the interior. Interior is nothing too special in here. You can see my monitor is mounted right here by the AC controls. When I want to watch the front camera, I just switch those 2 connections, and then that's pretty much it. The rest of it's just standard CB mounted there. A lot of people mount them up on the dash. I don't like stuff up on top of my dash, so you can see it's a little dirty and dusty, but this is how you would see my truck on an average day, so I'm not going to go through and detail it out and clean it just for the sake of the video. I use ARB deflator. I like it. It's very quick, works very well. I have spare valves, valve caps. These quick fist mounts you can buy on Amazon, or most 4x4 shops will carry these. This one is just a standard LED light. You can buy it at Walmart. Sleeves, gloves, standard stuff. My interior lights are swapped with LEDs. Those kind of help out at night. Definitely helps visibility inside the truck. Back here you'll see boat control. I must have left that in there. And this cup holder ashtray thing that was here was not there when I originally bought this truck, so it's become a nice little storage compartment for my strap. I have a fold-up shovel, some car seats. The third row is folded down right now. I'll go back there and show you guys that. This is my dune flag. Comes in very handy out at Butcher Jones and other areas that are close trails where there's a lot of people with dirt bikes and ATVs driving around. It quick disconnects right onto this guy right here. Sticks up off of the truck. Gives me a little more visibility so I don't have to worry about somebody plowing into me. Basically just a standard rack. You'll notice that my compressor is mounted up there. These are just quick disconnect latches. The reason for that is because this air compressor, when you use it, gets very, very hot. And it was not something that I wanted maybe rolling around or mounted back in the back here for my kids to touch and get burned by it or anything like that. So I came up with a way to mount it on this little rack system here. Keeps bags and towels and things for when we go to the lake up off of the tools. That way I can still access all the tool bags. Maybe one of these days I'll make a video of those. My air hose is just kept in the factory bag. And that's pretty much it. I got a first aid kit, standard stuff over there. So go down to the rear bumper I haven't made yet. You can see it's just been removed. That's it. That's all. There's nothing real fancy back here. You will notice that my sheet metal has been cut up. Factory sheet metal hangs down quite a bit here, and they have a charcoal canister that's mounted on the driver's side on our vehicles here in the US. Quite the pain in the butt. It looks very unsightly when you take the rear bumper off, so keep that in mind if you're thinking about pulling it or replacing it. I relocated the charcoal canister up underneath the truck where the spare tire used to be. You can see I've trimmed my exhaust off, put a hanger there. They have a big resonator section of pipe right here, and so I cut that off. I have a Flowmaster muffler in there that I welded in, and that's pretty much it. No real performance stuff. This has a 4.0 V6 in it. Plenty quick enough on the street. I'm not looking to win drag races or anything like that. If I want to race somebody, I'll fire that guy up over there. But Fox 2.0 shocks, these are actually off of a Titan that I had before. These are Armada springs. So if you have an R51 Pathfinder and you're looking to get a little bit better suspension out of the back, if you drive it down a dirt road or even kind of fast over a speed bump in a parking lot, you'll notice that the rear end bottoms out very easily. You put a case of water back here and it's bottoming out everywhere you go. Nissan, for some strange reason, uses a constant rate coil spring. Now what that means is that most coil springs, as they're compressed, they get tighter. They actually resist being compressed. That's called progressive rate. This is a constant rate, so the same amount of pressure it takes to move it an inch is the same amount of pressure it takes to fully collapse it. So these springs kind of suck, but you work with what you can. This is an Armada spring. It is 1 inch taller than stock, and it is quite a bit thicker in diameter than the stock spring that was on here. So if you wanted a cheap, easy way to lift your truck in the back, you could actually go to an airlift bag spring. It actually fits. You fold it up, you put it inside the coil spring, and you air it up to about 35 to 40 psi, and it will help stop that from bottoming out. I run a Fox 2.0 shock, like I said, off of the Titan. This gives me, in the back here, I'm running just a hair over 10 inches of travel. That is actually limited, believe it or not, by the ball joint system, the way the geometry is set up in this rear suspension setup that they have here from Nissan. Factory CVs are in there. The stock shock location, you can use that. You can use a Rancho 9000 or a Bilstein shock. You can even buy Radflow shocks in an extended travel. They give you about an inch more of droop. That helps out. It all depends on your budget and what you're trying to do. If you're really trying to keep the budget low, you can get a coil spring spacer, some air springs, drop in those for $100, and then put in an aftermarket Bilstein shock or a Rancho shock or some other brand of your preference, and the stock location, and it'll work pretty well. Close the back hatch. You can see all my stickers. You see me out on the street, honk, wave, whatever. I'm usually out here driving around. You'll see me out on the trails a lot. So that's pretty much it for this guy. If you have any questions or any comments, please let me know. Got one more thing I could probably show you. Over on this door I have a bottle jack mounted here. I don't carry a high lift jack, and a lot of people, oh my god, you're not off-road if you don't have a high lift jack mounted on your vehicle somewhere, and blah blah blah. I've wheeled for about 30 years. I've only seen a high lift jack used maybe twice in those 30 years of wheeling. So I do not want a 65-pound dead weight mounted somewhere, especially high up on the roof rack, like a lot of people do, or they mount it on the hood somewhere. I just don't, it's not my thing. I don't wheel in very remote locations. You also notice that there isn't a spare tire. I have a spare tire carrier that I'm going to build and put on the back, and I will eventually run a spare, but right now I just run a set of plugs, and I have a compressor. Over here, give you kind of a sneak peek, there is a Titan rear end there that is off of a 2007, and I also have the front diff for a Titan right there. So my plans are to eventually swap these out for aftermarket set of wheels and tires, which will probably be somewhere around a 40-inch tire. I'll be running lockers front and rear, and I'll rework the front suspension, and then obviously the rear will be leaf spring with a solid axle swap, but that's in the future. We'll see what happens. But for now, this is that's pretty much it for you guys. If you guys have any questions, hit me up, and I'll be more than happy to help you as much as I can. Thanks, and have a good night.